Mark Ricciuto nearly won the Brownlow medal in 1998. In fact, his season was almost unparalleled. Here's a list of every player to have polled 20 votes or more in 1998. His game was just different. Ricciuto's ride-or-die polling style didn't help him either, and neither did the fact that his contemporaries came from teams with more wins and dominant performances. But his biggest hindrance was sadly his biggest asset, which was his biggest teammate. Sean Wren had an insane 1998, polling 22 votes, one more than Big Roo. Ricciuto lost 3 real votes, and the presence of Wren drew attention and potentially more votes off of the small midfielder's better early performances. Having a teammate poll a large number of votes is the Brownlow hopefuls' kryptonite. All but a few winners have been the main vote getter for their team, with no star accompaniment to take votes off of them. Harvey had that in 1998. Ricciuto didn't. Then again, there was one thing that he had that Harvey didn't. But Ricciuto disappeared in 1999, as did most Crows. It was under Ayres, though, that he was to find a new role. He bulked up to his steady playing weight of 90 kilograms, heavy for a player only just above 6 foot. In fact, here he is, plotted on a height-weight ratio chart of his 2001 teammates and his 2020 Crows contemporaries. Short of Ian Perry... sorry, for some reason that keeps happening when his name comes up. He was the biggest bruiser-cruiser in club history, but it worked. Ricciuto became one of the last great enforcers of the game, along with Byron Pickett and the Scott brothers. Unlike them though, he could dispose of the ball with precision from either foot, pinch hit in the ruck, rebound off halfback, and act as a full forward, as well as lead a team. This time period was also the launching point for the final piece of Adelaide's midfield puzzle, Tyson Edwards. He'd been around since 1995 and he'd won a couple of premierships, but he generally spent time on the interchange bench or in the pockets. The departures of Kim Costa, Peter Vardy and Darren Jarman opened up space in the midfield, and Edwards jumped at the chance, doubling his disposal output in 2000 whilst not diluting his scoring production. Despite his wiry frame as well, he also increased his physicality, tripling his tackle numbers from 1998 to 2001. The Crows inadvertently shot themselves in the foot heading into 2001 though, securing Matthew Bode from rivals Port Adelaide for pick 12. This was a dumber trade than the Clark deal, as Bode had shown very little to this point, and the dumbness was one-upped by the trading of pick 23 to North Melbourne for Evan Hewitt. Even at the time it seemed a really odd move, but hey, even if these two didn't have a great impact, it would be fine, as long as the other clubs didn't use those picks to draft future Hall of Famers that would have changed the course of the Adelaide Football Club. Oh. Yeah, that sucks, that does. Just look at what could have been. The Crows were unconvincing in 2001, making the finals but never really looking like going anywhere, and they didn't. It was their first season without Sean Wren, the big man taking his number 52 to Hawthorn in return for that 12th pick that we wasted. Our ruck department was still the league's best though, as Clark, Biglands and Marsh combined to lead the league in hitouts, not that the midfielders did much with it. This being the Ricciuto episode, I'd like to say that he bossed it, but he regressed again. Most Crows did. One didn't. Andrew McLeod really didn't. Shane Woden won the 2000 Brownlow medal. Somehow. He was hot garbage, a one-season wonder with very little wonder. Ask most people who aren't Bulldog supporters, and they'll say that Andrew McLeod was the deserving winner, somehow 4 votes down on the Melbourne-based Woden. 2001 was McLeod's year though. He finds himself 2 votes down on the controversial blonde heading into the final round. Ackermanis had an uninspiring 20 disposal performance with Brisbane's offence putting their feet up against Sydney. No votes for Acker. McLeod? Oh, he just had 29 kicks, 8 handballs, 4 tackles and led his side in clearances and inside 50s. He went toe-to-toe with 1998 grand final adversary Peter Bell, whose statistical footprint was even more insane. Bell is a lot for the 3 votes. Andrew Demetrio announces the recipient of 1 vote for the match, Heath Black. He had a decent game, but McLeod's was clearly better. It's a formality at this point. McLeod can only get 2 votes, which will tie Ackermanis. McLeod will become the 3rd man to win a Norm Smith and a Brownlow medal, and the 1st man to win a Brownlow medal in the red, blue and gold of the Adelaide Crows. The final vote getter is announced. The 2 votes go to Adrian Fletcher. As it was, he won the Players' MVP, the Lee Matthews Trophy, though he had to wait 4 years to receive the thing. Now, the 2001 Super Draft, that's the stuff of AFL legend. The first 3 picks won premierships and multiple individual accolades. The 4th pick got creamed by a tram, but the rest of the draft ran deep with talent. So of course the Crows traded an early pick for an injury-prone, sporadic key forward. It would have helped if we'd selected Nick Dal Santo, James Kelly, or even Steve Johnson with our first real pick, but we got Brent Riley. It was good, but that hypothetical 2005 lineup would be just that little bit better with the first 3. It'd be even more so if we used that pick we wasted on Fitzgerald to get Sam Mitchell, Lee Montagna, or Gary Ablett Jr., but hey, we can't help that. Pick 44, let's see, key forward Brad Miller looks pretty good. I've heard a bit about Dane Swan, a speedy midfielder. Or we could go with Ben Finnin, he'll do well. Shit. Okay, this draft's getting away from us. Pick 59, last chance saloon here, boys. Sure, Brian Harris has a sleep apnea thing, but he played in an SANFL Grand Final. He's a local boy, we love that. Or, hey, a lot of clubs are bringing back old players. I hear Mick Martin's recovered from the Bali attack and he's available. Jacob Schuback. I guess you know what you do. Oh, fuck off. Nothing we did worked for that draft. We traded in Daniel Schell, a talented youngster who didn't play many games with us. The pick we gave Freo for him was used on Paul Medhurst, a 3-time club-leading goal scorer. That hypothetical 05 side sure starts looking good if the Crows actually participated in the best draft of all time. That is, of course, until the rookie draft. Usually these are a bit of a wash, but Melbourne picked up Mark Jamar. Carlton got Brett Thornton, the Bulldogs got Matthew Boyd, and Adelaide won the rookie draft. They recruited Paul Thomas, who went on to have a ridiculously successful SANFL career, partnering up with Shell, funnily enough, but failed to play for Adelaide. They also picked up 2 lads named Ben Rutten and Nathan Bock. Even despite their Super Draft super failure though, the 2002 lineup looked very solid indeed. And with the 1998 veterans on their last legs, this was the time to strike. The Crows had their best season to date in terms of pure win-loss percentage, with 15 wins. Tyson Edwards had his best season, Ben Hart had become one of the best medium defenders in the AFL, making the All-Australian team and claiming his 2nd best and fairest. Tyson Stenglein had become an elite midfielder without anyone really noticing. And then Brisbane happened. You see, Adelaide was in the unfortunate situation of being a very good team, going up against an elite team in Collingwood, and the best football time of all time. No arguments, change my mind, fight me. That best team of all time showed the difference between them and a mere very good team, destroying Adelaide by 12 goals. The Crows then had to travel to Melbourne to play their home game, thanks to the idiot MCC dictating their archaic Melbourne-centric fixturing that surely would have collapsed under COVID like one of Tony Modra's stepladders. Adelaide let a blistering 8-goal first quarter go to waste, letting a 40-point lead turn into a 28-point deficit in the shadow of three-quarter time, with David Neitz and Travis Johnston demolishing the Crows. Edwards was moved to a flank, Mark Stevens was moved forward, and Brett Burton increased his production to overpower the Demons, keeping them to a single goal in the last as Johnson and Stenglein held a stranglehold over the midfield. Somehow the Crows escaped with a famous win. The final task was a preliminary final against Collingwood, a tough task against one of the great teams on the Pies' home deck. Mick Malthouse pulled a masterstroke by starting ruckman Josh Fraser up forward, recognising the Crows' ascendancy in the ruck, but lack of a key defender. And he kicked the first 2 goals of the game. Ayres then made a quick tonal shift, moving Bassett up forward, where the Magpies' small defenders had no answer for him, scoring 2 goals himself to even the match at half-time, with both sides having had a 3-goal lead to that point and both sides wasting said lead. From there though, Collingwood's class saw them through, and a dominant third quarter saw them through to the greatest grand final of the AFL era. The big news in the off-season, apart from McLeod finishing top 3 in the Brownlow again, was the trading of midfield ace and premiership star Kane Johnson to Richmond. He had demanded a return to his home state. Adelaide held out for their still under contract man and got a king's ransom in return, picks 2, 18 and 32, as well as reliable key back Jason Tawney. And this may have caused the Crows to go a bit mad. You see, it's never been Adelaide's policy to chase superstars in the trade period, and Adelaide with an extra first round pick are like a mule with a spinning wheel.
No one knows how he got it, and danged if he knows how to...
First, there was Ronnie Burns, a live-wire Geelong forward who'd once scored 5 goals in a game with 0 recorded kicks, and he was a 5-time Geelong leading goalscorer. He was traded for Ben Finnan, remember him, who would never play a game for the Cats. Now this was a great signing to accompany young Graham Johncock and Brett Burton in the forward line, and was by far the most useful Ben Finnan had ever been to anyone. The second was a player on the outer at North Melbourne. Since the 1998 grand final loss, he'd won the premiership the next year, but he'd also started to become affected by injuries that hampered his mobility. Plus, there was the whole business of sleeping with his best friend and vice-captain's wife, not a great look for a club captain. He didn't play a game in 2002 as he effectively resigned from his own club. This didn't stop North from charging an extortionate price from any potential suitors, and so Adelaide paid pick 2 and pick 18 to secure the services of Wayne Carey. Now, signing a 31-year-old who missed a full season and battled mental issues is, well, a terrible idea. But the Crows with Carey were, well, average. Even if we eliminate the prime of his career and compare his 2000 and 2001 seasons with his Crows tenure, it's clear to see by most metrics his stats were worse. Embarrassingly, this was a bullet the Crows almost dodged, with Essendon keen to pair Carey with Lloyd and Hurd in a forward line of the gods. Still, the 2002 draft wasn't as good, so it's not like North could have drafted yet another 250 gamer with the picks we gave them, and yes, by this point you know where this is going. He did show in 2003 though that he could have his days. A 4-goal winning performance against his old side in a fiery clash, 5 against Sydney, 4 on his Crows debut, and 21 touches against West Coast, who are still suffering a finals curse against the Crows. He wasn't the only ageing legend though. Mark Bickley and Nigel Smart were founding members of the Crows and had given over 250 matches of service. They'd won premierships and best and fairests, but were obviously heading towards the end. Still, Smart's numbers hadn't even really dipped from 2002, and Bickley's actually went up, even after the dual premiership captain announced his retirement at the end of 2003. These performances were complemented by their successful 2001 draft picks in Riley, Matner and Rutten, a consistent Mark Stevens, an Andrew McLeod who was robbed of an All-Australian spot, and a Mark Ricciuto who very much wasn't. Let's talk about his 2003. He increased his efforts in 2003, beginning with captaining a pre-season cup-winning side, then doubling his clearance tally from the previous year and winning 100 more disposals, most of which were contested, which made him a notable force in the Adelaide squad. He also provided a far more effective rebounding force whilst not sacrificing his offensive side. These factors led to him being the first Brownlow medalist to wear a Crows jumper, and the first player in 15 years to share the medal with 2 other players, whose teammates didn't quite give them the scare that McLeod gave Big Roo. He led the Crows into the finals where Carey dispatched West Coast, but then a team whose leading goal scorer only scored 30 had to face the ultimate iteration of the best team of all time. Stevens actually made a mockery of the Lions' defence to start, kicking 3 in the first term, but that was as good as it got. The Lions gained traction, and Ricciuto had to face Lappin, Ackermanis, Power, Voss and Caracella essentially alone. The Crows were dumped. Mark Bickley called time on his career, and Mark Ricciuto's Brownlow season was wasted. Well, 3 Brownlow seasons were wasted actually. Now, I can't go on to 2004 without mentioning my main highlight from 2003, No, it wasn't one of Brett Burton's staggering array of high-flying marks. It wasn't John Cock kicking 6 goals from a wing, and it wasn't Andrew McLeod's famous winner from the boundary. It was a young kid in his first game wrecking an AFL defence. Ben Rutten was named as an emergency in round 3 and looked a chance to debut, but a thumb injury set him back about a month. His next appearance as an emergency coincided with knee problems for Carey, and so the 96-kilo 20-year-old stepped in the shoes of a man who'd end the season on 700 career goals. Now, the Crows' record with late inclusions that year wasn't great, headlined as it was by the mediocre Chris Latham scoring 2 in place of Carey on a previous injury. Henschel, Gallagher, Shell and Tawney all flopped when they were called in late. Not Rutten though. During a tough, low-scoring opening term, Henschel lofts a nice ball into Rutten, who outpaces the experienced but undersized Shane Parker. He goals with his first ever kick. Great, but not exactly uncommon. For Adelaide alone, Peter Vardy and even Lucas Herbert had done it before him, and these lads did it after him. This encourages Adelaide to pile on the lead, and by the time Bickley gives Rutten the ball on the eve of quarter time, the margin is up over 20. Rutten extends it with a long-range shot for his second. 2 goals, 2 kicks. But still, he's not even the first Crow to do it. Randall Bone was allowed the same luxury against Melbourne 11 years prior, and fellow rookie draftee Nathan Bock would do so a year later. But then, he sets himself apart by again outrunning Parker, and this simple kick, which he almost missed, puts him in an elite club of 10. Less men have goaled with 3 or more of their first kicks than have walked on the moon. However, this club doesn't guarantee success or fame, but all of them have had entertaining stories. Interestingly, Denning, Metropolis, Fairley and Rutten would end up spending most of their careers as defenders. Fairley would somehow end up scoring in his final game too, the 1996 Premiership. Tuck would move to the middle and later half back, eventually holding the game's played record for over 20 years. By contrast, Houlihan and Baldwin would each only last 2 seasons in the top flight. Hargraves would win a silo kicking competition in lieu of having a decent career. Jason Tutt, who achieved his feat only 9 years ago, has been out of the top league for 4 of those years. And Richard Lounder, the 1987 number 1 draft pick, who remains the heaviest player in the history of Richmond Football Club, went kickless 2 weeks after his 4-goal haul. He would only play 4 games in his entire career. Amazing. 2004 was the chance for Gary Ayres though. He recruited Scott Stevens, a hard defender from Sydney, for draft picks, but they again wasted the picks that they did have with that clockwork regularity that the Crows seemed to possess. This would finally start to build up as the club had no replacements for the 2 departing legends. This led to a 3-9 record at the halfway mark, disgraceful for a 2-time finalist. Carey though was on form and on track for his first 50-goal season since 2000. A 6-goal showing against a dismal Sydney team gave flashbacks to the man who owned the 90s, but a spinal problem suffered in round 12 ended not only his career, but Gary Ayres' too. The coach of 12 finals with Adelaide and Geelong, who entered 2004 with the same win rate as Malcolm Blight's Crows, was told after the following game that his contract would not be renewed, and so he elected to resign immediately. That game just so happened to be the last for Nigel Smart as well. 278 games and out for Adelaide's first All-Australian, a man who'd scored in both premierships, and a man whose on-field presence would be missed. The Neil Craig era began in fine style, with Scott Wells contributing to 8 of the 22 goals in a demolition of Melbourne. The 4-9 Crows stabilised to 8 and 14, but again had a star young midfielder express his desire to go home. Tyson Stenglein had just finished second, again, in the Club Champion Award, so losing him was another massive blow. Picks 12 and 28 were received, and pick 12 was on-traded to Melbourne, securing the Crows' best trade deal since Chris Groom got on that plane to Perth. You see, Mike Ricciuto's 2004 was incredible. With no supporting cast to steal votes, he actually set a personal best in Brownlow votes to win second place. His season, statistically, was slightly worse than 03, whereas Chris Judd exploded onto the scene. Statistically no better than Rue, but his disposal was so pinpoint, his class so obvious and representative of the new generation of athletic midfielders. The Adelaide mid's time in the sun was almost done. For 2005 onwards, a 29-year-old Ricciuto was to be moved forward more often, to crash packs, add forward pressure and act as a second for Scott Welsh. The Crows needed a like-for-like replacement. What they found was even more ideal. Scott Thompson was basically a zero-sugar version of Ricciuto, a hard midfielder with Judd's pinpoint disposal and supreme athleticism. In fact, let's take a look at his career. Here are all the players in history with more than 7,000 career disposals, sorted by disposals on the vertical axis and tackles on the horizontal. You see, midfielders tend to be either accumulators or inside hard men. You very rarely get a mixture of both. Thompson, though, is up there with the very best, but he was so multifaceted. Filter this list first for players with over 1,000 clearances, then 1,000 inside 50s, then 1,300 tackles, and hell, let's put a 1,300 marks filter on just for fun. You see that one dot that's left? That's this guy. He's top 30 all time in ball accumulation, defensive physicality, offensive creation, midfield dominance, inside toughness, and the ability to win games off his own boot. You just don't get that sort of player. Scott Pendlebury, only 9 marks from this club, is the closest, with another 2 certain Hall of Famers, the only ones in his postcode. That's the company he keeps, and he was doing this from day one at Adelaide, all while scoring only 4 less goals in 2005 than dedicated forward Ken McGregor. You see this? That's the result of the twin midfield efforts of Rue and Tomo, the genius of McLeod, as well as the evergreen Edwards and unsung heroes Simon Goodwin and Martin Matner. It was also the result of a stoic defence, which is what happens when it's led by a guy nicknamed The Truck. The Crows conceded less goals in their 25 games played than any other team, by a significant margin. The Crows also saw the second most of the ball in 2005, with only the Eagles beating them, which is who they faced to decide the McClellan Trophy in round 22. The Eagles started hot, with Trent Henschel stabilising the Crows to earn the lead at quarter time. Then Mark Ricciuto did what Mark Ricciuto does. He broke the game, and he almost broke Adam Selwood. He kicked 2 to bury the Eagles' spirits, and along with 30 touches for Edwards, a great performance by McLeod, and an insane 14 rebounds from Johncock, the Crows walked away with their first minor premiership, but also a week's ban for their captain. Ian Perry had finished the contest off late, but he kicked 3 of only 6 goals scored by dedicated forwards that day, which brings up the main issue with that 2005 side. Adelaide kicked the 4th most goals in 2005, which is not a testament to their forward line at all. Even a team with a killer midfield like the Eagles or Swans of that year scores most of their goals with their actual forward line. Adelaide, though, Welsh led with a mere 58 goals, but even so, he was a medium-sized forward. Their key tools, Perry and McGregor, were useless in key games most of the time. Both would combine for a mere 20 goals in the 8 finals they lumbered around in together. Barry Hall or Quinton Lynch, who are actually good forwards, both average at least 1.5 goals per final. Fraser Gehrig averages more, and he played half his finals as a defender. After Welsh's 58 season goals, Perry and McGregor's 39 and 31 weren't all that far ahead of the midfield brigade. This all came to a head against St Kilda's tight defensive unit, the Ricciuto-less top team of the AFL falling at the first hurdle to the tight defense of Fisher, Gehrig, Voss and Jones. McGregor scored 3 in the first term, but without a decent second to help him, the Crows wouldn't score again for almost an hour. The first time someone not named McGregor scored a maximum for the Crows, it was late in the 3rd quarter, and it was a midfielder with an old woman's name. A late surge was just that, too late, and the Crows were down by 8. And, due to a port win against the Kangaroos, the ultimate showdown beckoned. The Crows regained Ricciuto and exploded out of the blocks with 5 scoring shots in the opening 11 minutes, but only 1 goal. After Port gained the lead, the Crows hit back, and then Byron Pickett hit back. Port seemed to gain the ascendancy after Biglands was taken off, but like the Crows in the first, they squandered their chances, trailing by 7 at the half. Now, I don't know what Neil Craig said to his charges at the half. Allegedly, it was something about payback for the Biglands hit, but it worked, as the Crows nailed 2 goals in the opening 4 minutes and 8 for the quarter. Goodwin scored 3 from the midfield, Welsh got 4, Ricciuto played a major part, and even Ben Rutten got in on the goal scoring action. So the Crows ended up winning the ultimate showdown by a then showdown record 83 points. The Crows rode this wave all throughout the first half against the mighty West Coast at Subiaco in a goal-for-goal affair. Ken McGregor opened the scoring again when he was struck by Travis Gaspar before the game even began, but West Coast's Adam Hunter and Daniel Chick helped the Eagles cruise past in the third quarter to eventually take victory. And yes, it did hurt to see Tyson Stenglein make the grand final so soon after leaving, but we'd have to end up getting used to that sort of thing. It was all our own doing though. I've kept alluding to the 2005 side, which is our best chance of ultimate glory for 8 years either side of the match. If the Crows hadn't had a 9-year run of awful draftees, that side could have looked like this. That's a squad. That's a premiership squad. It was crushing, but the window was still open. The Crows had at best 2 years to make the most of what suddenly had become a golden generation. It started well with an appearance in the pre-season cup final, before climbing to the top of the ladder for several rounds. Mark Ricciuto was nearly 31 by this point, his body erect from his physical style of play, but he still had one final gift of the season for the club he'd given everything for over the last decade and a half. Neil Craig moved the now 93-kilogram man forward, and boy did he deliver. The Crows had put their midfield-centric scoring woes behind them and had an even spread of performances. Ricciuto, Henschel and Burton led a fleet-footed forward line, highlighted by an 8-goal performance by wiry Trent against Essendon, showing the 23-year-old had the world at his feet. Including Bigland's goals as a resting ruckman up forward, the forwards increased their goal share from 52% to 67.6% in 2006. And Ricciuto was at the centre of it all, with 44 goals for the season despite missing 4 games during the season and the entire final series. He was on track for 57 home and away goals, which would have been the second best non-Modra goal-kicking season at the time, and he was the highest scorer by far of anyone to miss 4 or more games. But a 3-game losing streak at the end of the season cost the Crows a second McClellan trophy, with injuries during this time to McLeod, Ricciuto, Burton, Hart, and a nasty one to leading scorer Henschel, which pretty much ended his career. Again, their defence helped them through, still having conceded fewer than anyone else despite these key injuries. Their poorer ladder position, however, saw them clear of both West Coast and Sydney. They beat Fremantle in the first week, with Michael Doughty playing the game of his life. They won their way through to another preliminary final, again against West Coast, but this time it was looking better. The Crows had a 22-point lead before Rhett Bigland suffered a career-ending knee injury. The ageing Matthew Clark had to carry the ruck load alone, and the Eagles wore him down. Dean Cox feeding Chris Judd and Ben Cousins, who torched the Crows. Cousins came through with 15 touches, 2 assists and a goal in only a half to put a full stop on proceedings. Nathan Bock kicked 2 late goals to stage a rally, but Ashley Hansen stretched the final margin to 10, guiding the Eagles and Tyson Stenglein to a grand final, which West Coast won. And that was it. As Simon Goodwin won a record 3rd best and fairest, his dual premiership winning teammate Ben Hart was unceremoniously delisted after 311 games, a career eventually deemed good enough for the dual best and fairest to receive Hall of Fame status. The midfield, along with youngster Chris Knights exploding onto the scene, carried the Crows to an amazing start in 2007 though, seemingly defying the odds. And with Mark Ricciuto being everywhere in this run, surely he'd be posting great numbers, right? Well, no. Ricciuto was done. as well as his 2006 woes, he missed the first half of 2007 through injury, and his return coincided with a steep decline in form for the club. They fell out of the 8 and they struggled to find avenues to their goal. The heavy lifting in the midfield was left to Thompson and the 30-year-olds in Edwards and Goodwin. It just wasn't sustainable, and it was clear that the moment had passed for Adelaide. The defence was still stoic, conceding the third least points in the league, with Rutten, Bassett, Stevens and Tawney holding down well after Hart retired, but the forward and midfield lines couldn't make it count. The Crows limped into the finals after some crucial wins, and a monster opening quarter made it look like Adelaide could be headed deep into September. Lance Franklin, though, had other plans. He dragged the Hawks back into the contest with 4 goals in 20 minutes of playing time. The third quarter was split before that big prick Franklin came back, inspiring the team to play around him. Crawford was excellent, and Franklin scored one of the great finals goals to claim his 7th of the day and win the day for the Hawks in crushing fashion. And for the Crows captain, that was it. A 300-game career with Brownlow and Premiership medallions had come to a close. Over the past decade, he'd done all he could to haul his side through sheer brute strength and force of will to a third flag, come so close, but failed. But what a player Mark Ricciuto was. In fact, take a look at the other players to equal him by featuring in 8 All-Australian squads. He was probably more versatile than all of them, in addition to captaining the side equally as often. There was one more player, who I missed here, that also went on to be in 8 All-Australian squads. And it was fitting, really, that the number 32 at the Crows would pass between them. From Mark Ricciuto to Patrick Dangerfield. And that was the Mark Ricciuto era. Thank you all very much for watching. The next chapter should be an interesting one. It's all about the Crows' search for quality tall players, which sounds less interesting than it actually is, but I look forward to seeing everyone back for part 4, which hopefully is going to come out sometime this year. Catch you then.